So will you please silence your cell phones?
Okay, I think we got 11, but
Hey, Kim, will you tell Floyd to turn my mic on? Or our mic on, I don't know. For some reason he keeps mine off. I guess it's my bad language. You ready to go, Kim?
Yes, sir.
I want to welcome you to the Wednesday, March 18th meeting, work session meeting of the Abingdon Town Council. I want to thank you for your attendance, and we appreciate your cooperation in attending the meeting. Kim, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bradley. Let the record reflect Mr. Bradley is not present. Ms. Quetch.
Here.
Mr. Webb.
here.
Ms. Patterson.
Here.
And Mayor Craig.
Here. I want to explain that Mr. Bradley sent an email and said he wouldn't be present because he takes a drug that lowers his immune system, and he thought it would be in everybody's best interest that he not be here. I want to make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Craig, second by
Go ahead.
Ms. Patterson. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Ms. Patterson.
Aye.
Mayor Craig.
Aye. Next item on the agenda is public comments. We have Ashby Dickerson.
Appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you. I've come to the meeting sometimes. It's the first time I've ever been the first one and didn't have to wait for an hour to say something. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Community Center of Abington and their Meals on Wheels program specifically. I'm pretty active at the center, teach a class over there and there quite a bit. And I know their situation with Meals on Wheels. I think their executive director has been invited to come next week to your budget meeting, we've talked quite a bit about the situation. Basically, with the coronavirus epidemic going on right now, they've lost and anticipate losing more funding. A lot of their income comes from people who rent the facility for weddings or meetings or whatever, and pay a fee, and they use those fees to support their operations. Their primary operation that they're most proud of, certainly, is Meals on Wheels, and it serves the most people and makes a good service for the community. Currently, they serve, I think, 300 meals twice a week, basically, to different households. Mostly homebound seniors, and I think they've also expanded that to military personnel also, who are former military personnel who need it. They're anticipating there'll be more requests now with people staying home more and being afraid to go out or whatever. So I know in the past that the town has helped with their funding quite a bit. And I think they're probably going to be asking you for an emergency increase in that amount. So I'm not part of them. I'm a lawyer in town. I make my own contributions to them. I just made a $500 one a couple weeks ago, and I'll do more of that because it's a good program, good people. You know, I'm active with the library also. You've seen me here with the Library Foundation. I'm president of that foundation, and a lot of good things go on in this town, but the Meals on Wheels is something that serves all the community, and anything you all can do to support that and increase whatever support you can do would be greatly appreciated by them and, more importantly, by the people they serve. So that's all unless you have any questions, that's all I wanted to say. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have any proclamations, no petitions, public hearings. New business, presentation from Sam Rosenthal regarding proposals for property and casualty insurance. Mr. Moran.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we had asked that the two consultant brokers that were on the agenda to not come to the meeting tonight. We felt like we could handle the discussion amongst ourselves. The first item that Mr. Rosenthal was going to present was in our property casualty. Currently, we're with VACOR. The process that was followed with the RFP process did not result in a solicitation or a submittal by the VML insurance company. And I think what I'd like to do is ask the council just to table this, just not take any action on it, just review it, and I'm going to just reach out to Mr. Rosenthal and see if there's still time to extend the deadline. And I was going to discuss the issue with Mr. Bell as well. So I know you've seen it in here, but I don't think it's necessary that we discuss it. I don't think that we have to take any action right now, if that's okay with everybody.
Is that okay with you, Donna?
It's okay.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jerry?
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right.
The next item is proposals for health insurance. Mr. Moran.
Yeah, this one will be easy. In the packets, you saw that the results, they were very favorable, considering that we've got a 0% increase proposal from the local choice through Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm just going to recommend the council just continue and approve the renewal with that. So I would like to get a motion if that's possible.
Okay.
Unless anybody has any questions. Continue the section.
No, I was going to make a motion.
Oh, okay. All right.
Council, what's your pleasure? You want to make a motion too?
Yes, if we could, I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead and pursue the recommendations from Mr. Morani's comments, that we go with this insurance company and choose the local choice with the 0% increase.
Okay, motion by Ms. Patterson to approve the recommendation of the town manager to accept the proposal for health insurance. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Webb. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Ms. Quetch. Aye. Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Ms. Patterson.
Aye.
And Mayor Craig.
Aye. Presentation from Mr. Sanderson from Davenport and Associates regarding our wastewater fund. My favorite subject.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, Jimmy Sanderson with Davenport and Company. David Rose, since his apologies, he was feeling under the weather. Luckily, it's nothing to do with what we're dealing with globally here, but he couldn't make it today. So, and I've been before council before, and it's good to be back in Abingdon. We've got a presentation before you. I don't know if we've got it up electronically or not.
No, I don't think
but
we did. We can, but everybody has a
Okay,
a
perfect.
copy of it, so.
This is specifically related to the wastewater fund. One of the things we talked with staff and wanted to go and look and see what your wastewater fund looked like sort of on its own without looking at the general fund. And so we'll walk through this a little bit. We put together a multi-year pro forma really to look and see at a number of things. What maybe your rate increases might need to be, in particular related to how other entities look at you. The Virginia Resources Authority is somebody that we often borrow money for utility funds, and we want to make sure that the financial picture we're painting is good and would meet their criteria. You've got at least a proposed CIP. And so we need to look and see how those are gonna fit into the future and how you're gonna pay for those based off your existing and future reserves. We obviously wanna avoid, if we can, any subsidies from the general fund to that utility fund. Make it be a standalone enterprise fund. And then again, we'll talk about this in a minute, industry best practices. So as it relates to, you know, what's your operating revenue versus your operating expenses at the end of each year, what your reserves look like as well, making sure that those are healthy. And at the end of the day, we want to try to minimize any rate increases that might be necessary. And lastly, we're gonna look at a timetable at the end and get your input in particular on how you might want to move forward. So if you'll flip over to page 2, the first thing we do is look at you historically. So this is your historical operating revenues and expenditures. Line C there in the middle, the C is in red, it's line 5. That's what we call net revenues available for debt service. So after you pay your expenses versus your revenues, what do you have left over for debt service? You can see right below that, that's your historical debt service, about $900,000 a year in 15 through 19. And then the second to last line is your surplus, and it's been good. You've had a surplus in each of those years. 2019, it was a slight deficit, but not anything terrible. And the last line, again, was something will come up later, is the concept of debt service coverage ratio. So that's a number that we look at that is simply your net revenues available for debt service divided by your debt service, and you want to have that number above one times. That means you're just there having enough money to cover your debt service. The higher that number is, the better that a lender is going to look at you, and they're going to look at you as being a more credit quality borrower. And so again, you've been above one times coverage good, and in 19 you were slightly below that at 1 times. So let's flip the page and look at the other big thing here is, what do your reserves look like? And this is page 3. These are historical cash and cash equivalents. The very top line we put in there, your operating expenditures at the end of the year. And we're showing both restricted and unrestricted cash. At the end of the day, you really can only look at your unrestricted cash. If you have to dip into it, what does it mean? But you need to have a picture of both. And so you can see here, we'll just look at total cash, $3 million or so each of these years. That's good. The unrestricted number had been above $2 million in 17 and 18. It dipped down to 1.7 in 19. May have been a function of some capital expenditures that you may have made as well. You moved a little bit of money up to your restricted funds. Sometimes we'll move money to the restricted category when we know we're going to spend it on capital. The other concept I want to introduce is what we call days cash on hand. And so what we're doing there is we're simply translating your reserves into how many days you could operate if something happened you weren't bringing in revenue. It's a ratio that lenders look to. And so on an unrestricted category, which is line 9, so if we go over to 2019, it's 254 days. We're simply taking the unrestricted cash that you have and dividing it by your annual operating expenditures and translating it into a number of days. So 254 days, I would say that's very strong in this type of world that we're living in. So you have a good amount of reserves for that, for the size of your operating expenditures. Page 4 is your debt. And Mr. Mayor, maybe I should have said it. Feel free to interrupt me anytime that you want. If I'm not explaining it well enough, I'm happy to stop and go through it. This is your debt picture that's paid from the wastewater fund. And you can see in the bottom left in particular, very good interest rates. Some of these are 0% loans. A lot of those are done through the state, through the Virginia Resources Authority. That's what the VRA bonds are. And so those are obviously the best loans that we can get. And others are 2.25% and 3%. Still very good borrowing rates. But the total debt outstanding, this was as of June 30, 19, was $6.6 million. And you can see over on the right, this is how your debt's paid. Graphically, up top, our debt service it drops a little bit in 21 and then pretty much stays level until we get out to 2028. So we have a pretty level debt service, and then it drops off pretty quickly. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about later, is maybe how we can use that drop off to layer in some additional debt that you might need for your CIP projects. Page 5, this is what I think is the proposed, Mr. Moran, the proposed CIP, right?
Correct, yeah.
And this is the summary of that CIP. And in the appendix, we have all the details of what these specific projects are. But for this purpose, we've just rolled them up into each year, what the annual identified projects are from 21 out to 2025. It totals $7.3 million. And part of it is a category of PAYGO, so that's cash that we're going to fund from our annual revenues. And the other portion is debt. And so 1.4 million, or 80%, I'm sorry, the other way around, 20% is the PAYGO, and we're debt funding 80% of your capital projects.
So, let me ask you a question. You're not using any of our unrestricted cash. You're using rate increases to give us for PAYGO.
We are in some of the cases, you'll see in the
Okay.
back, that's
All right.
correct. At the end of the day, whether we take it out of the cash at the bottom or whether it's paid out of the annual operating revenue, you'll see that with what your cash at the end of the day looks like. So it's all rolled into the same number.
Okay.
We'll go through that, Mr. Mayor. So page 6, this is an overview of the pro forma. And so just a couple things that we did. We're going to again look out 10 years, 21 through to 2030, and all of the scenarios reflect this. We've got just a general natural growth of 1%. So outside of any rate increases, we're assuming that your annual revenues are going to grow 1%. And the operating expenditures, we grow at 2%. So again, those are just assumptions. That's pretty consistent with what you've looked like historically, and I think we were comfortable with that from a staff level here as well. The connection charges and interest income, we held that constant, no growth on those. The interest rates that we're using, we're assuming that we're paying off our debt over a 20-year period and at a 4% interest rate. Those are, in my view, a conservative assumptions. 4% is pretty high, but again, we don't know what the world will hold. And 20 years of repayment on a utility system for 20 years, that's actually repaying it fairly quickly. So we could always extend that out further if we needed to. We've run 4 cases for you. The first case is really just a base case, and we've included this down at the bottom. We've assumed that you just pay all cash for your capital projects. And you'll see what that looks like. It's not going to work, and it quickly turns red. But again, that's sort of our base case to see what we can do without any debt. The second scenario is that we fund our projects with borrowings in 2-year increments. So we're going to borrow everything we need now for the next 2 years, and then once we spend that money, we're going to borrow it one time again and lock in our rates at that 4% interest rate going forward. So that equals a borrowing in 21, 23, and 25. You can see that on line 2. We're targeting rate increases, what we say here, as needed. So we're targeting rate increases as needed in order to generate a debt service coverage of 1.25 times. So when you went back before and we were talking about it again, that's how much money we have left over after we pay our expenses to pay debt service. So it really means for every dollar of debt service that we've got enough revenue of $1.25, 25% cushion. That's pretty standard for planning purposes in particular. Things may move up or down during the years, but that gives you some cushion that if in 1 year revenues or expenses go up more than you plan, that you've got a 25% cushion in order to pay your debt service. The next 2 cases, 3 and 4, we've done a little bit differently. Instead of borrowing immediately for all of our debt, as we did in case 2, we've layered it in for you. So remember how we talked about how our debt service was pretty level out until 2028? We've done similar to what we did on the Meadows project, where we borrowed with a line of credit, and we used that money. We only drew it down when we needed it. So you're only incurring interest until you've fully taken care of that CIP, and then we do a long-term borrowing at the end of that period. And what you'll see later that it does is it allows us to not start to pay that debt back until our existing debt service drops off, and we'll go through that in a minute. The biggest difference between case 3 and 4 is how we bring on the rate increases. So case 3, we did, like we described earlier, whatever rate increase we need to add, whether it's 8% in year 1 to get to that 1.25 times coverage number, we did. And in the fourth case, we just sort of smoothed it out and brought it in a little bit more evenly each year, and you'll see that when we go through the details. So I think, again, I don't mean to belabor that, but I think that setup will help as we go through these next few slides. We'll go a little bit easier. Slide 7, this is the base case that we talked about. Again, we're fully funding our capital projects with cash. And you can see, I think the upper left-hand corner does it pretty quickly. We immediately deplete our cash. We're just simply not generating enough revenue in order to make up for the pay-go capital that we would fund. And you would have to generate a material amount of additional revenue each year. And you see at its low point, you would have to generate an additional $600,000 each year of revenue in order to pay for that. So your rate increases would be multiples, instead of percentages, they would be multiples of where they are now. Again, that's just sort of the base case to test it and make sure it works out that way. So scenario 2, if you flip over, again, this is the one where there are immediate long-term debt issuances that we've got. Over on the left is our days cash on hand in the graphic, and on the right demonstrates our debt service and our debt service coverage. So let's look to the right for a minute. The right in the dark green is our existing debt, and the light green is when we add in the new debt. And you can see that if we do it this way, we're going to be adding a fair amount of new debt, and our total debt service gets up around $1.1 million pretty quickly from the $900,000 that it is now. But jump down to the table below. Let's focus really on line 2, which is the user rate increases. Under this scenario, in order to maintain that 1.25 times coverage level, we need 8.3% rate increase in 2021, over 5.5 in 22, a little bit in 23, and an additional 5 out in 24, a little cleanup in 26 and 27. So there's a fairly large rate increases that have to take place in the first 4 years, most of them in the first 4 years. But you're maintaining a good coverage, and the lowest point that your days cash on hand gets to, which is line 5 out in 2025 of 180 days. Still strong, and your reserves are right around, your unrestricted reserves, Mr. Mayor, in that case are $1.4 million. So lower than you have now, but still sufficient in our view from a credit perspective. Flip to page 9. Here's where we're getting a little bit more strategic with the borrowing side. With what I described, the line of credit, which is interest only for a number of years, and then we do our takeout out later. And you can see it in the upper right that our debt service is much lower than it was before. It stays under $1 million in all of these years. And again, you still have that drop off out in 2028. So that's what we would call some additional capacity that you might have for future projects down the road, where you're not backloading your debt so much that it actually rises, and so the people 5-10 years from now have to deal with actual rate increases to cover debt that we issued back today. So you're still protected in that way. If you go down, again, we did that same concept in line 2. We increased our rates to whatever we needed to, by whatever percentage we needed to, in order to maintain that 125 coverage. And you still have to have an 8.3% increase in 21, just shy of 2% in 23, and 1% in 24. So we're able, though, under this scenario, to limit those rate increases in the early part, in the early years. The very last case is a little bit more strategic on the rate increases. So instead of just increasing it to whatever we have to meet that 125 coverage, if you go down, you'll see that we've done it just a little bit more steady. So it's 4% in year 21 and 22, 2% in 23, 24, and 25, and we clean it up a little bit there in 26. Much more gradual increase each year in your rate increases. You still have days cash on hand of 153 out in year 25. That's almost $1.2 million. The only year that you have a lower debt service is in 21. So if you look at the debt service coverage in year 21, we're still north of 1 time. So we're covering all of our expenses and all our debt service with a little cushion, but we're not at that 125 number just in that first year. And we think that would be a perfectly fine plan if council wanted to look at it that way. Your debt service still stays below $1 million going forward, and again, you've got that drop off in debt service. We're not backloading all of the debt service to the future. Flip over to page 11, just real quickly, and here's the summary. And I think the main thing that we would want to point out here, case 1, obviously, again, was one that we didn't need to spend too much time on. But case 2, the total user rate increases, if we were to bring in our debt immediately, would be 21%. So you'd have to increase your rates by 21% over this time period. In cases 3 and 4, we obviously can't eliminate those rate increases, but we can minimize them. And they're both just shy of 15% in those cases, by sort of strategically putting that debt service on your existing debt load. So the next 2 pages, we wanted to, again, talk about, again, you can't cash fund based on what we're seeing here, absent support from the general fund, which we wouldn't recommend, or really material rate increases that you would have to generate that revenue. But you can maintain a healthy financial position using both PAYGO as well as moderate rate increases. We do think when you can use PAYGO as part of your plan, it's a great way to do it. It gives you flexibility in the future. If you have something that goes bump in the night, you can sort of pull that out of your budget and put it back into the financing side. It's not something you want to do permanently, but it certainly gives you some flexibility. And if we do it in a little bit strategic way on the debt side, we can mitigate the additional revenue that you need to generate from the user base. So our recommendation certainly would be for you to consider and look at those scenarios 3 and 4. It's not, again, in our view, we're not doing anything silly with respect to our debt, and we're able to draw the money down when we need it, similar to the structure that we did with that Meadows line of credit. On page 13, we put together a timetable for you. We obviously want to get some guidance from council today on how to move forward. We put together a little bit of a timetable on if we want to move forward with that structured debt with a line of credit. We can certainly go out and test the waters and get some proposals back from lending institutions, and we've done that before for you, where we go and we actually get the bids from them, we bring them back to you, talk to staff first, we'll bring them back to you and let you see them, and if one makes perfect sense over the others, we make recommendations, but we can talk through the differences between them. And then the last thing would be to try to put something in place before the end of the fiscal year, so you would have it as you approach your projects going into FY22. So, Mr. Mayor, that's my presentation. And again, I think you got this material in advance. There's in the back. We tried to consolidate the modeling a little bit, but all of the detail is in the back for you. If you have any detailed specific questions, we're happy to go through that.
Thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Do we have any questions?
I think it would be helpful if, for me and Davenport, if maybe we had an initial reaction to whether or not, I mean, staff's recommendation, I think, is to go with scenario 4. That was my, I think 3 or 4 would be fine, but I think if we would look at 4 as a model, it would flatten the rate increase in the first year, and I think it's
checked 4.
Okay, I think it was pretty, I mean, I think they did a really good job in presenting
So,
Of
your
the four.
personal, and I don't want to put you on the spot,
Yeah.
but, 4 seems to make the most sense to me, just because that limits sort of a sticker shock for rate increases. Do you have any real strong feeling against or for one or the other?
No, I mean, I think both would work. And part of this is what we did was we generated what the percentage of your revenues that you would need to increase. Part of what you need to work with now is what does that mean for the individual line items of your user rates. So it may be, we've done it so that it's 4%. I mean, do the math, it may end up being 4.1% in total.
right.
But no, I mean, I think what people generally like to see is that gradual increase. It's helpful. Sometimes it's helpful to do rate increases when you need them, obviously, as opposed to waiting. I've got some clients that they'll wait and wait and wait, and then all of a sudden they need to do a 10% rate increase, where maybe citizens would prefer a little bit more gradual increase. So I think certainly scenario 4 makes the most sense from our perspective. It doesn't put you at any financial shortcomings. Again, there's that 1 year where you're below that 125 coverage number, but you're still above that 1 times coverage number, and so that made sense from our perspective.
Jimmy, let me make sure what you're asking, council. This is just for guidance.
Yes, for guidance, so we can direct Davenport and Company on how they're going to proceed when they reach out to the lending institutions. One thing that we talked about on our conference call a couple weeks ago is if we do the blended, the cash on hand, the
There you go.
not pay-go, but yeah, essentially, we're gonna have a situation where we might be able to, if we don't, depending on the projects, what we're gonna be able to accomplish that first year, the second year might not be a 4%. It might be a 3-2%, you know what I'm saying? So it provides us some flexibility, those third and fourth options.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's a great point. I mean, again, the line of credit side of this. I mean, oftentimes we'll look at CIPs and we think we're going to spend X and Y dollars the next 2 years, but projects typically go slower than engineers tend to be a little bit more aggressive on when they need funds. But that's a better way to do it than being going the other way. So oftentimes we find that we don't necessarily need all of the dollars that are projected in the CIP. Doing a line of credit would only require you to draw down the specific dollars that you need for that year. And so this may be, well, it may be set out as a 5-year, 10-year CIP. It may actually draw out 10 or 11 year or 12 years.
I'd rather not do 8%, you know, at first, not knowing
Yeah.
we could catch up in the second year if we had to, and
Yeah.
do the full, that would be my recommendation, and
It seemed, I mean,
Yeah.
for me personally, that's why I was asking, it just seems a little more palatable, 4% rather than 8 or 10%
Right,
that first
right.
year. Just my opinion.
So you favor,
4 is my, you know.
okay. Jimmy, I think,
yeah, okay. I think we've got good
yeah, I
direction on that.
favor 4 too,
Okay.
so.
All right. I think they did a really good job on this, and,
They always do.
yeah, this was really, this was
Thank
really
you.
good.
For
Yeah.
your presentation. It was a very clear presentation. and
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Very
it.
well organized. The next item, discussion regarding sports complex budget. Mr. Webb.
Alright, excellent. So we're in exciting times with the sports complex. We're getting ever so close to getting this thing out to bid. We've had quite a few meetings as of late discussing the different options, and we finally have a theoretic pad design, if you will, to present to the Rec Advisory Commission actually later this afternoon. And one of the things that I think we're struggling just a little bit with is trying to figure out exactly how much bang we can get for our buck. As everybody knows, things don't generally get less expensive as time goes by, and we have been approaching this sports complex for quite some time. So, long story short, my goal was always to have as much green grass and as much playing space as we can for all the different sports and events. And I think that's really sort of the direction the Rec Advisory Commission is going to go. We want to try to build out everything we can from the very beginning, and perhaps when we go out to bid, do kind of an alt ad for a few different accessories, if you will, the furniture that goes along with the sports complex. But having said all of that, when looking at the numbers, it does look like we're going to need to probably tap into a few more dollars. And, you know, like I said, we've had some lengthy discussions with Davenport as well as management and the Rec Advisory Commission. And I think it would be wise before we go out to bid to go ahead and try to tap into the extra $2 million that we originally were sort of approved for with our bond rating. I think that makes the most sense. We're going to be able to get everything done at one time, and I think that's really where the sweet spot is trying to get enough turf out there, if you will, for people to play on, so. And, like I said, we've been talking with Davenport, Jimmy, I think, some of the things that stick out in my mind over the past couple of months is when we captured that first $7.5 million at a very low interest rate, I think it was less than 3%.
2.89.
We ended up saving about 1.5, it was either 1.53 or 1.503, I can't remember exactly in my mind, but in interest alone over the duration of the payback. So I think it's fair to assume that that would allow us to dip a little further into the money and try to borrow a little more.
So
what's your
we've
perspective?
got a couple of ways to look at it too. I mean, we've got, we were able to get our borrowing costs down on that 7.5 million to 2.89%, which was wonderful. I'm so glad that we were able to do that. We still have another 2.5 million to do. Interest rates, frankly, interest rates are all over the place right now, but they're still very low for our local government clients. So that 4% number that we talked about before in there is wildly off. And again, that's one of the planning conservative things that we use. We're still seeing our clients get very good interest rates now in the bank market in particular. We're seeing right now. So we would be even at that 3% level still with any new money. So I guess my point was going to be, one, the additional monies, no matter how much you need to borrow on it, we've got to do $2.5 million that we know we need to do. If we add an additional $2 million in there, I don't see any implications from a rating perspective, in my view. And I think we can look at what our interest rate is when we go to lock that monies in. And if there's any pressure on when and how it gets paid back, and again, we were on the aggressive side with that first tranche and said we were going to try to pay this back in 20 years, and it all worked out. But that doesn't mean we couldn't go out 25 years for a loan, or maybe do it a little bit more strategically and structure it so that it layers in a little bit better. So I don't think that the cushion that we had in the analysis that we looked at before would cover that. We may have to move it around a little bit, but I think it would work out fine. And I don't think that it would have an impact from a credit rating perspective to the town of Abington either.
So I guess the next step and the next question we're going to have makes logical sense, but how quickly do we need to move? What's the next step in trying to get this?
So you would need, if you were to do it as a general obligation pledge, which would give you the best interest rate, you would need to have a public hearing on the additional $2 million. We don't need to do anything on the additional 2.5. That's already been approved. You would have a public hearing, and you would have to adopt an ordinance, I believe. Mr. Bell can correct me if I say something wrong. And then what we would look to do probably, once you get your bids back and you understand what you want to do and how much it's going to cost, that would be a really good time then, I think, to move forward and lock in all of the interest rates that you can, both on the 2.5% or $2.5 million that we've got outstanding with Carter Bank, and then whatever the additional amount is. If it's $2 million, we would know at that point. But I think it would be important to understand the timing of the bidding process too, and maybe tie that in with your public hearing as well. It's meaning whether are you going to sort of navigate to the additional $2 million, or are you going to know what the price is before you have the public hearing or take an
And
action?
it could come in below 2.5%, right?
2.5%.
The interest rate.
Well, it could. I'm not going to tell you what it is today because I don't know.
Okay.
That
But
was my question, if you knew about what the interest rate would be. I mean, are they dropping like on a real level? You said they're all over the place.
So here's the reality is the markets need to settle down a little bit. Right now we're seeing interest rates move all over the place, and in the public markets, frankly, a lot of transactions just aren't being done because the rates are so crazy. If you look at what most people are seeing are U.S. Treasury rates, and the 30-year Treasury rate last week got down below 1%. unheard of. That didn't translate directly to our local government clients. So they're still able to borrow at low rates, but they're not borrowing at the same levels that the treasuries are. And that's simply the entire world flocking into U.S. Treasuries and driving that interest rate down. So I really think that we need to have a little bit of a time to let things settle out. I mean, this has happened before. It happened in '08. I wasn't practicing in '87, but I understand that's a lot of what happened in '87. And the market just needs to let itself shake loose a little bit. I think then I'd be able to give you a much, much better answer as far as what your interest rate is. But I will say that we are at or better than where we were end of last year. So I still think we're in that, just to give you a sense of a framework, we're still at that 3% or lower phrase, our number.
That's good
Yeah.
news.
Let me ask a question. If I understand what you and Derek have said, it would seem to me that we might want to go ahead and have a public hearing on the amount of bonds that we think we're going to need.
Mhm.
Does that have any, we don't have to issue the bonds or anything, we're just prepared to do it.
Mhm.
Same way we're proceeding with the engineering and everything else. But it would seem to me that like you say, engineers want the money to be there when they award the contract for the sports complex. So it would seem to me if there's no definite decision to be made, but just prepare to do what we need to do at that time, because the construction needs to begin as quickly as possible because of the expected weather conditions.
Mhm.
So it's a prime construction season. So it seems like to me that we should just proceed right ahead, regardless of the uncertainty, and monitor that.
Yeah, and
Does that
that's
make
what,
sense?
yeah, and that's what I was speaking to, that if you were to go ahead and do a public hearing and get that sort of authorization both from you and then obviously the citizens' input, you can have that $2 million extra ready to go and deployed. When you get the construction bids back, if it's higher than that, then you're gonna have to make some decisions to try to get that number down, but that'll be the number that you've gotta work toward, is having, it was that $12 million number.
Okay,
Did
Jimmy,
you
you need
say-
some guidance from the council?
I
on
think
that?
there's a consensus. I think I would recommend, I would agree with the mayor that I work with Cam and Davenport, and we just proceed with setting up the public hearings and subsequent.
Can I get something cleared, Mr. Mayor, please? Did you say 12 million? That's the 10 plus the 2, right?
That was the 10 plus the
Okay,
2, yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
I agree.
Cindy?
I agree to a public meeting.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. That's all we're gonna do, is we're just gonna initiate.
And I agree.
Okay, all right,
So
we'll do that.
can I reiterate this on the floor here? We've spent like over 4 million and you have this report ready? I mean, you know the money that we've spent already?
I don't have it in front of me, but
Okay.
yeah, we spent, actually, John is probably better
If you're not
knowledgeable.
ready
Yeah,
for
we
it.
have somewhere, we've spent,
I don't know if I'd rather want to throw numbers out.
yeah, I don't wanna throw numbers
Okay,
out.
that's fine. We'll wait till the next meeting. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, I could give a report the next
Yeah.
meeting, but basically,
Sure.
we've got a very complicated spreadsheet that we've gotten from CHA, and we've actually had 2 revisions, and we got the one last week, and I can share it with anybody on council if
Yeah,
they wanna
that's
see
fine.
it.
Just
And it shows what we've paid, what we're gonna get in like grants, what we have left on a change order, because remember, we passed that change order last year. So there's a lot of moving parts, but what Jimmy is saying is, we haven't even done the other 2.5 million yet. So.
That's right.
So we're not even to the point where we're to that stage yet, but when we go out to bid, we've got to have the capacity to be able to fund the project. And in the event, if, we've talked about donations and things like that,
Right.
that's fine, we can get those later, but I think the point is, let's try to, and we are gonna be looking at cutting costs in some areas, but still keep the essential the essential model or the scheme that was developed, but there might even be some things we talked about that staff might be able to do, like some landscaping and stuff. So
Yeah.
we're trying to strategically work through that, so.
Well, that's exciting, and if you could have maybe a breakdown of that, maybe for the next meeting, that'd be
Mhm.
great, and for the public.
Yep,
All right.
yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Derek. The next item is discussion regarding adoption of an ordinance regarding the collection of delinquent taxes by distressed personal judgment or sale to include publishing delinquent taxes in a newspaper of general circulation and/or on the town's website. Mr. Moran.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is something that we're not going to take any action on right now. We wanted to put in front of you a draft of an ordinance that, this is something that came out of the Finance Committee. We thought there is a state statute that permits this. Some municipalities around us do this, some are talking about doing it. Essentially, what this does would just be to publish in a newspaper of record any delinquencies on taxes. This is an ordinance that Mr. Bell's prepared. I know we had talked about, there were two different options that we could look at doing. Kim, was there something that we needed the council to decide on about that, at least about that portion or that section of the ordinance, or was that
I
something
think
that
it was just for
internally-
discussion.
Okay, just for
internally.
discussion, so, okay. So we don't need the council to make any decisions on that yet.
I think that the two, one they have is my version, and then just one that comes straight out of the statute, say the same thing. They're just, the part that comes out of the statute is just more specific as to what taxes we're talking about, and
Okay.
the earlier draft just says all the taxes that are provided in the code, so. Given the option, frankly, I think I'd rather do the more specific one than the less specific one, to make it clear, but.
But we don't have to make that decision yet. We could discuss it. We could discuss it. We just wanted to make sure that everybody was comfortable with this concept before we moved it forward to a future council meeting, and if you'd like to bring it back to a future committee meeting before we initiate it. But I thought if we put it in draft form and get it to the council, and we're doing 2 readings, if there's any discussion that could take place, we could do it at the next regular meeting if there's any changes anybody wants to see or any comments. But that's really up to you guys. So.
So it's just for information.
It's information. If you want to proceed with it, then I can proceed with it and put it on the next council meeting for a first reading. But we don't have to do it right now. It's really up to you guys.
What's your pleasure? Do you want to proceed with it, or?
We can discuss it if that's all right, if you
It's
want to
fine.
discuss it.
Sure. Okay.
You want to discuss it more? Or?
Not today, but at another
Oh,
meeting,
yeah,
yes.
okay. We want to proceed with it.
Okay. All right. Do you want me to get it on the next committee meeting then? Would you rather have me do it that way, or do you want me to just go ahead and put it on the agenda, the regular agenda, and just have it in draft form as a first reading?
Well, we've got the information, so we might as well put it on. The
Okay, let's do that, and then, like I said, it's a first reading, and you guys can discuss it that way. If you decide to move forward with it, we haven't lost, any time on it. And then if you decide, when Wayne eloquently reads his, shall this, what is it?
What I do?
Shall this, you eloquently read the shall this proposal
Be rejected.
be rejected? That's what it is, yes, Mayor. And then if
Shall the
somebody,
proposal be rejected?
so you read, and then we can just discuss it at that point and see if we want to move it, because it doesn't have to move if we don't want to.
Thank you.
Okay. And we will get it, and I'll discuss with Cam the verbiage that we want to include in that, of those 2 options, so.
Okay, next item number 6, discussion regarding an easement from the town of Abington to Virginia Department of Transportation for Creeper Trail.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
How are you? Just want to bring you up to speed on where we are as far as the easement. I think I presented to you before, explained to you what VDOT was requesting of the town, and gone back and forth with Mr. Bell on the language within the easement, and currently Mr. Bell crafted language in there to, I would say, further protect the town's interest in that section of right-of-way. Stipulate in there that VDOT will be required to get a written agreement with the town and the town of Damascus as well. when and if they want to block the right-of-way or impede the traffic at all, and if so, give us an idea on the duration and any additional accommodations that they would make for the trail users. So I did forward that to VDOT's right-of-way staff, and they are currently considering it, and they will be getting back with us with, hopefully, or assume, a revised easement document for us to review again. So that's where we are, and be glad to ask or answer any questions if you have any.
So what happens next? We send this to VDOT.
After we get an approved document, then we'll have to, I think we'll have to have a public hearing on the easement and get a signature on that, and the town of Damascus will have to, or the town of Damascus actually has their separate agreement, I'm sorry.
But it'll still come back to the council.
It'll come back to the council again for your review and acceptance. And then once we get that back, this is just part of their project progression. They're continuing on with the design and everything as if they already have the easement. So we're not holding them up, I guess, I'd say. So
We tried to craft language to incorporate council's feelings about trying to limit the blocking of the trail.
Right.
I think frankly, if they're building a complete superstructure over the trail, that we're not gonna be able to eliminate closures altogether, and that may be extensive. At least we have to say, at least we'll be able to plan for it if we have some separate document. Of what they drafted said they can just do whatever they want, which I thought we wanted a little bit more input than that.
I mean, it'd be nice to at least, and I think we all kind of felt that way, but it'd be
Yes.
nice to at least, like, the bike groups that come down in droves of people, it'd be nice to at least warn those groups, hey, this day
Oh,
we're
certainly.
gonna be blocking it from 8 to 4 or whatever.
And if you all remember, and I can't remember if I brought this up last time, but when the tornado blew over Trestle 7, we obviously had to have a closure for somewhat of an extended period. And I would anticipate we would do similar things there. Obviously, social media, but we also posted signs at the trailheads indicating that the trail was blocked at certain mile posts. So I think we'll do that as well when VDOT's doing that work within this easement area. But the language that Mr. Bell crafted, it requires a written agreement, so we can get all that spelled out and make sure that our interests
And
are
we'll see
taken
what the
care of.
response is. So obviously,
Yeah.
we're working cooperatively with VDOT on this, but we're just trying to protect interests, and they're
Right.
obviously trying to accomplish what they need to do. So it's just
It's all part of it,
it's
and
a
actually, you know,
give and take.
they're used to dealing with some pretty adverse property owners, so I think this
We're a
is.
piece of cake.
They probably think this is a piece of cake, exactly, so.
I've
question?
got a question. And,
Sure.
When I went out there and I looked at the stakes and everything, I saw where they were gonna put the road, of course, and all, but, when they go across the water, you know, the river there, where is it gonna come out on the other side, coming toward Abingdon? Because I couldn't tell.
Toward Abingdon, it's up on a cliff, basically
I thought.
80 to 85 feet above the river itself, because that's how high the bridge is gonna be. So it's, from the existing roadway, it's, I'm gonna throw a number at it, but I bet it's 250 feet east of the existing roadway. So it's, to get to it, you have to hike or trespass at this, to get to where the bridge itself is going to cross over there. So if you're on the creeper trail, I mean, you could spot it, and maybe that's where you were and saw some stakes there. But it's over near the treatment plant that Damascus has. Yeah,
Beautiful over there.
it's a nice, oh yeah, it's a nice area.
That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Oh, thank you. Anybody have questions? Thank you very much.
Just for information, Jimmy.
Yeah, just for information, no action, and
Yeah.
I just wanted, we put it on the agenda not knowing if we were gonna hear back, so we just wanted.
Or at what stage we
or
would
what
be at.
stage we
so-
were, so we figured John would just give an update, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Discussion regarding the composition of Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Review Board. Mr. Moran.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is something that I've actually discussed with a couple council members as early as probably last summer when I was hired. And, I'm proposing that we make a change to the code, and I think I have a good recommendation that it will be a good balance in the event the particular council at the time wants to change the composition that we have right now, not with the citizens, the ones that are citizen members, but as far as staff or elected officials. I am strongly recommending that the council amend the code to not have the town manager as a sitting member of the planning commission. I think it is just, we have staff presenting reports, we have staff presenting recommendations to the planning commission, and I think it puts me in a very awkward position when we have my staff coming and saying, hey, this is something that staff is, and many times they're looking at me, and I don't know, I just been in place for a while, but I just feel that it's not appropriate any longer for me to serve in that capacity. So I think that there's probably not gonna be any disagreements on that from the council. Right, I mean, is everybody in agreement? There's no objections to that, okay? My recommendation for and I've discussed this with the mayor, so we could try to figure out how we could make this where it could benefit. It could be a happy medium as far as the council is concerned. I think it would be good to amend the code to say that the council member may serve, the council may appoint a council member to that position. And that leaves it open to the council if they decide they don't need a council member there. And you got times where, I know in situations where you say, hey, we really need to have a liaison, you know, on this advisory board because it would be helpful. And then there are some times where you're like, you know what, we don't really need a council member on there right now, and we're fine with the composition that's at right now. So I would recommend that we amend the code to leave that up to the council to decide. And so if that additional member, it may or may not be a council member. And then it's up to the council at the time if they want somebody to serve in that capacity. And I'm willing to open it up for discussion if anybody wants to. And
So initially, the council member was put on there to be a liaison, to inform the other council members about what's going on in that.
I don't know if that was the
meeting.
intent, or if it was just to have somebody there who is a council member to have some knowledge of city government or town government. I don't know, I mean, it was done a long time ago, so.
Mr. Bradley told
Yeah.
me that, if I remember correctly, that it was mainly to give the planning commission information. The planning commission
Sure.
might make recommendations that are just economically
Right.
out of the question.
Right.
And they may not know that. And
Right.
Originally, that's the
Right.
reason. Putting a council member on there is not recommended by the training that we've received from the VML. But I do recognize that
Yeah.
in instances, there may be a question of having good qualifications on there or something else.
Yeah, and there might be,
Maybe a
depending on
need.
the existing composition of the planning
Yes, sir.
commission, you might feel like, you know, it's good at this point, we need to have this council member because they have expertise in this area. But also remember that I think that at this point, you know, we have very competent staff, and I think if there's any concern, and back in the day, I don't think we've professionalized, you know, management and the planning department as we have nowadays. I think it's come a long way, so I would hope that anything that needed to be recommended to the planning commission could also come from staff. Yeah, but I think it's good to keep that option available if you want to, as far as the council's concerned.
The statute itself says one member of the commission may be a member of the governing body of the locality, and one member may be a member of the administrative branch of government of the locality. So
Right, it says it may.
It's permissive under the statute for both a council member and for
Right.
administrative staff.
So it's not illegal to do it, but the council in its discretion could adopt a code that says neither of them can serve, because the statute says may, but it would be consistent with the statute if we kept council member as a permissive.
Permissive with vote or?
No, permissive with being a sitting member, a standing member of that body, so.
We're required now by our ordinances to put a
Right.
council member on the planning commission.
Correct.
All we're doing is eliminating that requirement and.
Saying may.
We can appoint somebody from the council or appoint somebody from the public,
Right,
either way.
right,
So-
but then also eliminate the requirement in the planning commission of the town manager.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that would be not permissive, that would just be removed from the code. And then, so we'd be essentially just changing one word in the section of the HPRB would just say may,
Instead of shall.
Instead of shall, or, and then with the planning commission ordinance, it would just say, so there would be another member of the public, another citizen that would take my place, and then, you would decide, if you wanted to continue to have Al serve on that capacity, so. But I'm very strongly that I don't need to serve in the planning commission. So.
Well, do you know how others do this, other places do this?
It is the exception to have,
Okay.
let's put it this way, I believe it's unheard of to have a town manager
Okay.
on, I have never, I don't think it's appropriate.
Okay.
I'm not saying that, it's not illegal, I just don't think it's, I mean, obviously the statute allows it, but I just think it is very, it's not good practice.
Okay.
I have seen, even where I came from in Illinois, I have seen council members serve on boards, but it still is the exception rather than the rule. And I think the best practice is to have an independent body of citizens from the public making that recommendation, and but like I said, I don't think it's wrong to have a council member on there, but,
I can see your point.
yeah.
So the next step, Mr. Bell, would be what, to have,
To
since we're
amend it.
changing the ordinance, we'll have to have a public discussion of
Mhm.
this.
Not a
public
Right.
hearing. We'll have a
Public
first reading and a
hearing.
second reading.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think it'll require a public hearing, but it will be on the
Public
agenda.
discussion,
Yeah.
okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
Jimmy, what you want to decide is that the way we want to go?
Yeah, I think that's consistent with what
Is that, do you want?
we'll check and make sure there's not a public hearing required by it. I don't believe there
Is
is.
that the change that you want to make, to take the town manager off? say,
Yes.
and-
Yes.
And leave it optional?
Yes.
I think having that option is good.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree.
Okay. I think that's a good direction on
Okay, matters not on the agenda, discussion regarding sewer disconnect suspended for 60 days for failure of pay. I guess you're gonna talk to us about that, Jimmy?
Yeah, and actually, I originally had said 60 days to Kim, but the ordinance actually says through April 30th, so. What we are presenting, and you were distributed this sent via email, and we didn't amend the agenda. We had a lot going on the last couple of days, and with the preparations for facilities closures and everything. But we wanted to make sure we got this out to you yesterday, and it's a good thing. It's something that a lot of utility companies are doing, and we needed to really wait until this meeting to consider this. And this is essentially a resolution statement by the council that we will be suspending any sewer disconnects for non-payment through April 30th, 2020. And it would sunset at that date unless the council between now and then took further action. So AEP is doing this, Atmos Energy, WCSA, Service Authority has done this. I don't know for what duration, but we think this gets through 2 billing cycles. We think this is a reasonable time frame, but it can be revisited sometime later. So.
You want action on this today, right?
Yeah, I think we need to have action on this today if the council wants to adopt this, yes.
Council, what's your pleasure?
I'd so move that we adopt it.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Webb to adopt the resolution, a second by Ms. Quetch. Any discussion? Kim, call the roll, please.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Ms. Patterson.
Aye.
Mayor Crick.
Aye. Report from the staff. Discussion regarding COVD 19 town facilities.
I was gonna take this one, Mayor. Everybody should have probably seen the release that went out yesterday. And we've had several meetings with staff over the last week. We tried to keep the meetings as limited as possible as far as number of people and space. We did them in here, actually. We think we have a pretty good plan in place. We have been very proactive in discussions with staff, particularly about work-at-home arrangements, and we have tried to have an open dialogue with everybody about that. We don't know what's going to happen, over the next week, but as of tomorrow, town hall will be closed, but everybody will be reporting. People can call, people can pay bills in the sewer department online. There's drop boxes. We will still be conducting business. We will still be providing the essential services to the community, and business will go on as usual. We will have a closure of the facilities for approximately a 2-week period. We'll reevaluate that probably sometime in the next week or so. I just wanted to open up to any questions, if anybody had any questions or comments or concerns about the facilities in general, or any public services.
Jimmy, I had a question about permits and things like that
Yeah.
that people might need. Have you all kind of made?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I know you had asked about having the hard copies of the permits. We feel that with the weather conditions, it might be very difficult, and with the myriad of permits that we have, they are all online, but we are also, IT is also gonna be working with making those into some of the ones that we don't have as fillable PDFs. And what they are is, you could actually download the document on your computer and then just fill it in and save it and email it. Now, we will try to make our effort if there is somebody who does not have a permit, they don't have a printer. Right now, the library's closed, so people couldn't maybe use a computer if they don't have it. We are gonna make our efforts to arrange, if we have to go out and give a permit to somebody, on a case-by-case basis, we'll do whatever we need to do. But is there anything you wanna add to that?
We
Joe?
have a drop box down there
Right,
now, so.
right, but the mayor was concerned about how people were gonna get the permits.
And we can,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll still, unless something changes, we have staff here, so if we get a call from anyone who would typically, or if they come by, all they have to do is ring a doorbell, we can pass the paperwork through.
Yeah,
the door.
and the beauty of the first floor is Nancy, she can see right out that door.
Right.
And so even if somebody were to drop something off, she knows that somebody's actually, deposited something,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
don't
good.
anticipate too much of a disruption of that.
Yeah, the only challenging thing would be the plans, if somebody were to drop off like a, 3x4 set of plans, but we
We've got accommodations for a plan.
do now? Okay, all right, so, hopefully that answers your questions.
Any other questions, Council?
I just wanted to say thank you for being proactive of, closing the Kim Center, because obviously the governor said this later after we've done it, so
Yeah.
I think that was being very proactive, and I'm just thankful that we got that done, and we're being a proactive town.
I can tell you that as early as mid last week, I was probably talking to the Coombs Center staff on probably every 4 hours.
Yeah.
Tell me what's going on, what are, and I talked with the chief about it. I mean, we felt that the timing that we did it was appropriate. There was an event there, and there were people that were really depending on participating in this volleyball event, and we feel actually the public was very well received that we didn't shut it down until after that event. Tony was there, and I think there were good positive comments about that, but we just shut her down after that, so, and then since then, there's been these recommendations, so, that's probably one of the most vulnerable areas because of the amount of people coming through and everything, so. And they're staying busy, so.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is discussion regarding governor's executive order.
Yeah, Chief Sullivan's gonna, before he gets up here, I wanted to publicly acknowledge Kevin Worley. He was on top of ordering supplies before, I went to him and said, hey, can you order more of these? And he had already done it weeks before that, so he just was really on top of things, and I just wanted to acknowledge him for being proactive. So sanitizer, toilet paper, those things, so. All right.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Mr. Moran asked me to just say a few words about this. As with most things, there's a good thing there's 3 branches of government. There's 3 branches of government for a reason, but not to have a civics lesson. The immediate response last night to this was vapor lock, much like when they proposed taking away guns. Everybody sort of freaked out. I tend to, as I do, always look at what Colin Powell has as leadership rules, and his first rule of leadership is, it's not as bad as you think. And he later modified that to say, it's not as bad as you think, and it looks better in the morning. Today, this looks a lot better than it did yesterday. When you dissect this, there are only 3 types of establishments that are affected at present: restaurants, theaters, and fitness centers or gyms. Social media and the news makes it appear as if the police are like riding around, peering in windows, counting how many. I can assure you that we're not doing that here. We don't have that many people, first of all. This is done really with hopes that people will self-regulate, which they have. If you try to visit any of our fast food establishments in town, by and large, most of them are drive-through only. Most all the other restaurants are doing takeout only. My thought and my direction to our staff was, look, you play this by ear. in Virginia, enforcement still has 3 definitions. 1 is make an arrest, 2 is write a ticket, and 3 is give a warning. I think this would be handled by and large through warnings if it came down to it. You know, if we see an obvious violation, if anything's still open, you know, and we get a complaint, we're gonna address it. But our goal is compliance, our goal is not to criminalize any behavior. I mean, I've got some issues. I mean, obviously, there's constitutional issues with some of this as far as enforcement goes. In my view, of course, I'm not an attorney. There's a good one right here. At least I hear he's good. But our direction to our staff is, look, know it's here, know that this is a misdemeanor, it's either a Class 1 or a Class 3 or both, depending on which charges you choose. That would normally be a summonsable offense, but those are also things that we give warnings for. You know, our goal is not to prohibit commerce and not to prohibit people being able to do the few things that we can do for this brief period of time. So I think it's important that you hear that from us, just to know which way we're planning to go. I've had some communication with some folks who don't fall under this, and I've asked them to fall back on, you know, the president's guidelines of, you know, just 10 people, and people who are 65 should self-quarantine right now. And, you know, if that's the clientele, we would encourage you to make arrangements for those folks who are 65 or older, so we don't put them in that risk group. Let's leave them at home if we can. So that's where we're going. This is nowhere near as bad as it appeared last night when I first read it, after having a chance to digest it and think about how we're going to work our way through it. I think here again, it's an emergency declaration for a finite period of time during this state of emergency. It's something that we'll work through. Questions?
No, I just want to say thank you and for what y'all do, everybody. I mean, they're all working hard, all y'all, all the first responders, and thank you so much.
But, and truthfully, as odd as this sounds, you know, it's not in many lifetimes do you get a chance to work through historic events. And one of the things that I told our troops is, you know, you're young enough to where you're working through something that's historic that you'll be able to talk about, you know, for years. Even though it's a terrible thing, it's why we're here. So, thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Jane had a question.
We spent the morning at the visitor center calling all the restaurants and retailers and getting their amended operations, services.
Jane, would you come up to the
sorry.
microphone? That's okay.
We had the visitor center staff call all the restaurants and retailers this morning. They've got a chart of what restaurants have modified their services, modified their hours, modified their dining, of course, in compliance. We will be posting this and sending it out to partners so that hotels know how to serve their customers, so that businesses know how to serve their customers, but more important, residents know how to support our businesses. So we just prepared that this morning. It's a moving target, probably is obsolete as we speak. You know, it's just hot off the presses, but it's coming your way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay, the next item is discussion regarding electronic meetings and electronic communications, March 6, non-departmental government budget meeting.
I'll let Cam start with that.
As you might imagine, most of the localities around Virginia are struggling with this issue, as are private businesses, as to how to meet and when and how to service their constituents during that period of time. There's a statute, 2.2, 3708.2, titled Meetings Held Through Electronic Communication Means. So there is a mechanism in place now. We need to take a step first to adopt a policy. I think in the ordinary course, there is a provision that says any public body may meet by electronic communication means without a quorum of the public body physically assembled at one location when the governor has declared a state of an emergency. The limitation on that, though, as it currently stands, is that the purpose of the meeting is to address the emergency. So I take that to mean you can't just have a regular meeting to talk about everything just because the emergency is going on. The meeting itself would have to be about the emergency. There is a provision, though, that if we adopt a policy to allow electronic communication at a meeting, it requires a quorum of the public body be physically assembled at one primary or central meeting location. So 3 of you would have to be here, and then 2 could call in. There's another exception actually too, which may have applied to Mr. Bradley in this circumstance. If you notify the chair ahead of time that you have a medical emergency, then you can call in for that purpose. But you can only do 2 of those presently a year. The Local Government Attorneys Association has asked the Attorney General to opine on this issue. Seems like desperate times call for desperate measures, and perhaps there'll be an exception extended for this, but it might be prudent to adopt a policy for this purpose, and then in future purposes if we have to rely upon it, but it still will require a quorum of this. Another complicating factor is going to be, of course, we're in budget season now. That in particular requires specific public hearings. We're talking about other things that are going to require public hearings. What I've heard so far and what the code says and our ordinances say technically is that people be allowed to come in person to air their thoughts on public hearings. So that might be something else that we need to address. I know the IT department and other people have been, and Jimmy have been talking about how we accommodate that, perhaps have a quorum here and the public in another area of the building, or be spaced 10 feet apart, or something along those lines. But that's something that we're going to need to address. I don't know if we need to do that today. Maybe we wait until the rest of the state has reached a consensus and pass something then.
Well, we have a little while before the next regular meeting, so
Yeah.
we could, there's 5 Mondays in March. So April 6th, by then we'll have an idea maybe on, but I think we probably should have something in place.
But what we could do today, if you want to take action today, perhaps there'd be a motion that I draft a policy, subject to Mr. Morani's review, that we put into place. We could put a caveat in there that you ratify it at a later date or reject it later if you don't like it, but I can certainly
You're
draft
saying
something
put a
that's
policy
consistent.
together that would be implemented prior to council's approval, or?
They assign the authority to us to draft it. I guess we could do, unless you want to wait until the next meeting, but that's.
No, I think they could assign
that's
us to
sort of-
draft it. Yeah, they can do that. We can draft something, yeah.
Okay, that's what I want. Somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd make that motion. I think you hit the nail on the head, desperate times, desperate
Yeah.
measures, and we want to be able to operate as well as we can. So I would make a motion to grant you guys the authority to draft up something that will allow us to continue to serve.
And I'll second that.
Second, motion by Mr. Webb, second by Ms. Quetch. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Ms. Patterson.
Aye.
Mayor Craig.
The item that's related to that is the non-departmental meeting that we have coming up. I've talked to the mayor about it, and I'm recommending that we have actually already started contacting the organizations. We would like to have them just give them time slots and have them call in and do just a phone interview. We would still assemble for the meeting. Technically, it would still be open for the public, but since there's really not any business being conducted, I don't expect there to be an audience here. Obviously, we'll still live stream it. It'll still be on the YouTube page. But if everybody's comfortable with doing that, we're just going to encourage these organizations to call in. Here's your time slot, and call it. We might do it in Arthur Campbell room. We'll probably do it in Arthur Campbell room, I think, or we'll figure that out. I'll talk to IT. Is everybody comfortable with that? That format?
By
Yes.
contrast to what I said before, that's not a mandatory public meeting. That's just giving people the opportunity to speak, to give input on the budget, and we'll have a separate budget public.
Yeah, this is just when we were gonna have the organizations come in and present their case for funding for the town's budget. We are also gonna ask them to submit anything that they might wanna bring in advance via email. So Tanya and Kim are already working on that right now. So if everybody's comfortable with that, we would just like,
I think we are.
We are.
so, okay.
Okay. The next item is council reports.
I have a report. Our town manager, Jimmy Morani's one-year anniversary is coming up at the beginning of May. As councilperson, I am thankful that we were able to find such a qualified, compassionate, and principled person to lead our town staff in service to our citizens. I have confidence in his leadership. He has been very open and honest to council's oversight. He has brought his lovely wife and very nice children with him to Abingdon and is building a home here. Furthermore, I know that town management cares about each and every town employee. In my roughly 2 years on council, I have come in contact with many really fine town employees. Our town is blessed with a great workforce. Management cares about their health and happiness. Management wants them to be well paid, treated fairly, and provided with good fringe benefits. They want them to work in a fair and healthy workplace. In return, I believe it's reasonable to expect employees to work hard, be honest, and submit to the leadership of their superiors in service to our citizens. Just do the right thing. We all have people who we answer to. I answer to the citizens of Abingdon. My first responsibility is to them. I firmly believe that the best way to promote a happy and healthy workplace is to promote honesty, loyalty, and respect for their employer. You do no service to employees through loose management of the town's resources. Jimmy Morani and the team he is building is doing away with loose management. He is truly doing what's right for the town of Abingdon, and I look forward to working with him as long as the citizens allow me to serve on council.
Thank you, Donna. Cindy, you have anything?
Well, actually, Mr. Ashby had mentioned, when he was here earlier about the Meals on Wheels. They're taking extra applications, additional applications, trying to help some of the folks that can't get out with meals. Just want to reiterate that in this time of crisis, I guess you want to call it that. And so just want to make note of that, that if anybody has family members that need care, food delivering to them, then you would want to contact the community center. I hope there's other organizations out there. I didn't have a chance to get involved in that, but perhaps Feeding America may have some things. I'm not sure if they, they're still operating or not, but contact those places if you're in need. And goodness, if there's anything that we could do as council, I hope I'm not overstepping my bounds to say, give us a call if you need something.
And as to children, the school system has several things in place now to feed kids now that they're out of school.
I believe the school buses were delivering, I think, and that's wonderful. I think that's great news. But I've gone to some of my meetings, and the rest of them are, of course, canceled till further notice. And we're just going to get through this. We have to be strong and positive, and just get through this crisis, and just be patient and don't panic. It's a pleasure to serve.
Thank you, Cindy.
Welcome.
Derek, do you have anything?
Yeah, just real quickly, everybody already knows I'm kind of on the front line there at the pharmacy, and I can say in 13 years of being a pharmacist, I've never quite seen a situation like the COVID-19 come about. It's mass chaos in the grocery stores. That's the best way to put it. It's been absolute utter chaos. In the pharmacy, it's just been wild. It's just been wild. But I have to say, I admire the work that Jimmy and the team is doing, the proactive approach they've taken, Tony with our police force. Everybody stepped up, and I guess what I'm trying to say is I just appreciate all the employees and what they're doing. I think we're doing a great job, and it's, as Cindy said, we're going to make it through this. And certainly, if I can do anything for anybody, please reach out.
I just want to thank the town council for cooperating with the staff and with me. I really appreciate your work. This is the hardest working group that I've ever been with, so well, thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor Craig.
It's teamwork. Takes a team.
Okay, nothing, help me with the agenda. That's it, isn't it? Yep.
We are.
Yeah, we need a closed session, and Mr. Webb has a motion.
Sure. So I would now move that the Abington County Council convene in closed session to discuss the following. Number one, as permitted by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, a personnel matter involving performance evaluation or job assignments of specific employees, and a personnel matter involving demotion, discipline, or resignation of a specific public officer, appointee, or employee of any public body, and as permitted by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3, a matter involving acquisition of real property for recreational purposes, because discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect our bargaining position. And last but not least, I'd also move pursuant to the charter of the town of Abingdon, Section 4.8 to, wait a second, no, never mind. I thought we were, no, not yet. Yeah, sorry, that's for later. I apologize. I was reading too fast.
Okay.
So I guess that, with that, we go to closed session.
Is it?
Oh, did you read? Okay.
There are two parts of one.
Oh, okay, got you.
Okay.
Motion by Mr. Webb to go into closed session. Are you done?
Yes, absolutely.
Motion by Mr. Webb to go into closed session, and by Ms. Patterson. We okay?
Yes.
Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
And Mayor Craig?
Aye.
feel like I'm back in labor and delivery.
That's where my wife works. Labor and delivery, although she didn't work.
Okay, everybody here?
Motion to reconvene.
Yeah, council, is there a motion, we go back into open session?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Motion by
second.
Ms. Patterson to go back into open session, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Quetch. Any discussion? Kim, call roll, please.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
And Mayor Craig?
Aye. Now, Derek, do you have a motion for us?
Got
No,
to-
it's
Certification.
Certification.
Okay, certification.
So I move that the town council certify that in the closed session just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matter or matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in closed session and lawfully permitted to be discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion.
Ms. Quetch, do you so certify?
I so certify.
Mr. Webb?
I so certify.
Ms.
I
Patterson?
so certify.
And Mayor Craig?
I so certify.
And now I have a motion to
All
make.
right, we'll make it.
I move pursuant to the Charter of the Town of Abingdon, Section 4.8, to remove Charles Banner as Town Treasurer, and pursuant to Charter Section 4.3, to appoint Tammy Baldwin as Town Treasurer to serve at the pleasure of the council.
Motion by Mr. Webb.
Second.
Second by Ms. Quetch.
Twitch.
Any discussion? Kim, call a roll, please.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Aye.
Ms. Patterson?
Aye.
And Mayor Craig?
Aye. Okay, council, that completes our agenda. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.